Welcome to Impactology Live. We are here with our next guest, and both Rita and I are very excited with the next chat. Before we get into our conversation, just a reminder, we are streaming live on Facebook and on YouTube, and there will be an opportunity for Q&A at the end of every conversation. So please jump in there. If anything comes to mind that you'd like to share, you'd like us to share with the speaker, please feel free to leave your comments and questions. Our next speaker has a strong reputation for building global high-performing teams and known for her exceptional leadership qualities. And it is our absolute pleasure to welcome Dimitra to Impactology Live. Dimitra, welcome. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, George. Thank you, Rita. It's good to be here with you today.
Thank you for joining us. And for those of you not familiar with Dimitra's story, I will just share just some background information that will help set the scene for this chat. So Dimitra is a bold, transformational HR leader and global experience working with some of the world's most recognisable brands, including Revlon, Estee Lauder, Thomson Reuters, AXA and Nike. With experience working across multiple industries, Dimitra is a trusted advisor to CEOs, exec teams and boards of directors, and is currently the Chief People Officer at S&P Global. Now, Dimitra has made a significant impact on both Rita and I. We worked with Dimitra many years ago, but continues to inspire us. And no doubt, and we certainly know from our network, Dimitra has also inspired and impacted so many people that she's worked with over her career. So we're really pleased that Dimitra can join us. We have so much to cover in this conversation, Dimitra. And where do we start? And I thought we would start right at the beginning. If you can share with us your key influences and role models growing up.
Absolutely, George and Rita. It's, as I said, it's a pleasure to be with you. And I think my role models, everyone has role models and you need role models. And for me, it was my mum and dad for sure. And, they had a typical migrant story, but my father instilled really the importance of hard work in all of us when we were growing up, and perseverance, and definitely he was the first to really throw the equality piece out to us. He treated his sons and his daughters equally, and I think that was a fantastic lesson. And my mother was a pillar of strength and still is a pillar of strength. Incredibly bold, incredibly fearless, and a wonderful combination of both of them. They were just fantastic, and they raised a family of 4 kids, and all of us were encouraged to be ourselves. It was fabulous.
Dimitra, and your parents migrated from the island of Crete to Australia. And like many migrant stories, there were challenges and opportunities and struggles. How did this shape your view of the world, given, I guess, your upbringing?
Well, you know, George, firsthand what it's like to grow up as a Greek in Australia, and Rita, you as an Italian in Australia. And it was tough. It was definitely tough growing up. I think the most, there was challenges, there were struggles, but I think that definitely I was shaped by that experience for sure. And my parents took a risk, like most parents took a risk to leave and in search of a better life. So I think the main thing that I take away that's really shaped me is, in order to, you really have to take risks. You really do need to take risks in your life, and you do need to make sacrifices. And I'm not talking about sacrifices of your family, but other sacrifices. You make choices. And when you make a choice, one thing is, it's sometimes a sacrifice. And I think that was definitely a big piece for me that shaped me along the way. And I suppose the other second item was around my mum and dad had a lot of drive, drive to succeed. They weren't educated, but they really drove hard. They worked hard, as I said earlier, and they just really wanted us to be our best. And they encouraged us to have drive. They never really taught us to get A grades in school. They really just encourage us to be our best and to have the drive to do well in life. And I think those two things definitely shaped us.
And Dimitra, we always, growing up, well, certainly for me, I'll speak for myself, looking at my parents as migrants into Australia, they share with you their stories, and they share with you the values, and it's not what they say, it's the what they do. But I think there's also a part of me growing up that was like, look, I just don't want to hear it anymore. How did your parents' parenting style influence how you parent?
Oh, great question, George. It's true. I definitely feel like I say all those wonderful Greek sayings that our parents, gave us when we were growing up. The Matia su dekatesra, which basically means, have 14 eyes so you can see and be open. And, you can take that in multiple ways. Like, you can be open-minded, you can, be careful, be safe, look around you, be aware of your surroundings. I think that is definitely a piece of me that I've instilled in my poor girls. But lots of things. I mean, hard work is obvious. But my parents were bakers, and we are bakers. My daughters are bakers. We're a family of bakers. Even my husband's a baker now. We all love baking, and it's wonderful to see the generation of bakers coming through. But yeah, it's I think there's things that I loved about my parents' parenting and things that I didn't like, and sometimes I have to pick myself up and make sure I don't do the things I didn't like.
Well, Dimitra, anytime I was disciplined as a child, I used to have Greek proverbs thrown at me at really fast to just try and, learn the lesson. You've got to listen to me. So a lot of these Greek proverbs are coming up in my mind now as you were sharing the one that you just shared now. If we shift our focus in terms of, I guess, how your leadership has evolved over time, and I guess looking at the influences growing up as well, can you share with us the role of mentoring and coaching in your early development?
Very critical, George. Without any mentors or coaches, I don't think I'd be here in New York City today. Right from the beginning of my career, when I was even in ANZ Bank, I had mentors. I had Pamela Wilson and I had Robin Casillo, and they were phenomenal women that really took me under their wing and helped me grow. And then at Nike, I had Mel Sutton as a mentor. He was the CEO there. I was really blessed to learn, and he taught me a lot of wonderful skills that I still use today as a leader. And when I came to New York, I had Stephen Dando, who worked at Thomson Reuters. So, you need a mentor, you need coaches, and I've definitely had coaches in my career as well. And all of them were incredibly selfless in their time, and they invested in me. And everybody needs to, become a mentee or a mentor in their life, and really then continue that cycle of giving and developing others. And I think you can't, I know I wouldn't be here in New York City without them.
And how do you feel that role of coaching and mentoring, but more broadly the developing leaders, how do you think that's evolved in recent years?
It's definitely less formal, right? I don't think the development of the formal days is here anymore. I think that's definitely gone. I believe that it's less formal, it's much more organic, and I think it'd be fair to say even just through, the agile working that we're all, and I'm not talking about agile in the workplace in terms of, speed at home, I'm talking about the agile methodologies that we're working with today. I think has really helped us really grow as leaders as well. I don't think it's classroom settings alone anymore, and, it's definitely much more informal. And I prefer people to have mentors and coaches because it's so much more tailor-made and customized for each individual as opposed to sort of like a group think session.
And Dee, what I will share, we've got a question here about advice to young professionals, but what I wanted to do was just share a very quick story. So Dimitra and I first met back in 2002. We were working in the same organisation. Dimitra just joined to lead HR in that organisation. And I'd already been in that organisation for 9 years at that stage. And Dimitra and I got to know each other, and Dimitra was always great in terms of some advice. And I just recall this one conversation that actually changed the trajectory of my development and my career moving forward. And I was sharing with Dimitra what I was doing. And Dimitra paused and then turned around and said to me, and I remember it clearly, it said, "But what are you doing?" And with that idea of what are you doing, spoke so much. And it was about the taking ownership for one's development, for one thing, but also having a plan. And at that stage, I loved the role that I was in, loved the organisation, but I didn't have a plan. And that simple, maybe it was the sum of the parts, but it was that particular example around what are you doing, George, that sort of woke me up out of a slumber. So I just wanted to share that in the context of this next question here, because as young professionals out there that are watching this, you're not alone with the question that I'm about to ask here, because I certainly face the same challenges as I'm sure many of you have that have gone on to progress their careers. So the question, Dee, it's a big intro there. What advice do you have for young professionals starting their career and how they can develop into effective leaders?
It's a really wonderful question to reflect on. And I think, when we're like products. So when you think about it, we are like products. We need to differentiate ourselves. We need to differentiate ourselves in a way that's, we stand out, that we have a completely useful proposition or an unusual proposition or whatever you want to call it. We definitely need to have a differentiated element to ourselves. And I do think that that's important to start to think about that early in your career and to develop that and to take it further. And I think that's really important. And it can be whatever it is. It doesn't, you don't definitely want all the same products, right? You want people to be different and you want people to bring different things. So I think people should think about what that is. And, sometimes you don't know immediately, but it falls into place at some point in your career, and then you just got to keep nurturing that and developing it.
And if we can just extend on that as well, Dimitra, I don't think this concept was as obvious probably even 5-10 years ago when we used to think about brand. We used to think about our external brand. But just extending on what you've discussed there, the importance of internal brand and what young professionals can do to, I guess, best set themselves up for success.
Wow, there's so many things that we can all do. Now, when you're a young person starting off, or early careers, as we say in the US, we don't say young careers, early careers. I would say, we have to think about, if we think about ourselves as products, we have to think about ourselves as, thinking about the attractiveness and thinking about that uniqueness, but also thinking about how do we develop equity? How do we develop, a brand equity piece to ourselves? In other words, that it's attractive to some company. We have to think about being our genuine selves, of course, and I think you do develop brand, internal brand much later. It sort of takes a lot more shape, but early on you need to think about what you stand for, what your value set is. What sort of leader do you want to be, or what sort of leader do you like to work with? What's the attraction of a particular company or a particular industry? I think you have to think about these early on in your career, and then you start to shape yourself. I don't think you and I know, George, it takes years and years to really build a brand. Like it's not something you do overnight, right? And Rita, we know this. You don't develop a consumer good product overnight. And so you really do need to think about what you stand for and almost think about what's not negotiable. and then develop yourself over time, and that will turn into your own brand. And I think that's an important piece. And again, there's no real, it's an art and a science. I can't really say it's just a science, and it's not just an art, right? You have to really, think consciously, but also your experiences will shape you along the way. So you've got to be able to move with that.
Yeah, and the importance of feedback and leaning on good leaders within the organisation or internal or external mentors to be able to inform you around how to navigate through that, those early stages when you begin to find out more about yourself and what you stand for as a brand. Dimitra, the last, 2020 as a whole has been quite a challenging time for all of us. How has this time reshaped your leadership and work style?
I would say, George, it's shaped me a lot. And I just recovered from COVID myself. And my whole family actually got it. One by one, we were literally recovering. And I think it's fair to say in my workplace, about 450 people have had COVID and 3 have actually died. And that's all since we've worked from home. No one was in the office. We have been working from home since January 27th. And starting with China, starting with Hong Kong, starting with Asia, and then by March, pretty much 98% of our workplace was actually working, 99.8% I should say, of our workplace were working from home. It's clear that 2020 is a year that I'd like to see come over fast, and a nice new fresh year coming into another month or so. I think we've learnt a lot. I think we've learnt that there's so much empathy. It's so evident everywhere you go. People, companies are really thinking about their people more than ever. Flexibility is the obvious change we've seen. And we've seen it in its real sense, in its real true sense, and it's working. And it's so great to see it working. And there's no more managers saying it's not possible, right? Everyone knows it works. We've had our most productive financial year. We've had incredible performance quarter after quarter. So we're doing that all through working from home. I think the wonderful thing about this particular weird time and challenging time we're living in is that we're all equal. Every single one of us is equal. We're all working from home. We're all juggling. Some people are juggling young children. I'm juggling 2 older kids that came back home after living out of home and coming back, didn't want to live on their own anymore. Everyone's struggling in some way, grieving some way for their loss of life the way it was, wanting a little bit of that back. So it's really true. For the first time, I think we're all feeling much more equal than ever, because everyone has struggles and everyone's juggling multiple things. And I think that has helped. This is a very humanizing time for us. It's given us a chance to really just stop and think about each other and to really reflect about the things that are most important. And quite frankly, I think that's the most wonderful thing about 2020 that we should not lose.
Dimitra, certainly, to your point, 2020, it's a year where we've seen stuff that we never could have imagined, particularly from a workplace practice perspective. From your observations, from S&P Global, but also broader than that within other industries, other organisations, what do you think are the changes that will stick beyond 2020 and beyond COVID?
Definitely flexibility. There is no question about that. We currently have a team called Reimagine, which is reimagining the workforce post-COVID. And I will tell you right now that we have created a hybrid model, and people will probably choose to work from home a couple of days a week and in the office a couple of days a week. And the office environment will change. We're designing it differently, and we're thinking about it differently. So we're thinking about how do we serve our customers differently? How do we work differently? And where do we work? And those 3 things and 3 elements and pillars, as we call them, are really going to be different. We're not going back to the way we used to work. I don't think that will ever happen ever again.
Dimitra, I've been I guess, a big supporter of changing the system of work and flexible work. And for me in particular, that came about when I had Sienna, and Sienna's nearly 13. And I know when I was working with you, and it was back in the early 2000s, your girls were little. And I remember, I didn't have kids at the time, I remember coming into the AXA offices thinking, wow, what a fantastic leader, and how does she do it? How have you perceived these changes to a more flexible working environment, and potentially one that I agree with you is going to be here to stay? What have been your thoughts on observing that when you've had to do it for such a long time now?
It's great for women, it's great for men. Let's put it that way. It's great for everybody. And I don't think, I was a proponent, as you know, back then, and I was very happy that even at Nike, back before AXA, I put in a paid maternity leave and paid paternity leave for the first time, and it wasn't even the norm in Australia. I think it's important. It's an important part of a relationship with your employees. You really need to be able to work together, create that flexibility, that understanding, that empathy, and I really think that it's here to stay, and we're not going to have any more of these doubting Thomases in the workplace that say that things don't work like that anymore. And I think it's wonderful for both genders and all our people in the workplace. And I'm really pleased to see that it's going to be one of these things that we'll look back in the past and say, wow, look what happened. Look what happened in this era. It's fabulous.
It's a shame we needed a pandemic in some cases to make it a bit more sustainable, but I'm very grateful that there is silver lining even in a pandemic. 2020, not only has it been the year for COVID, unfortunately it's seen the rise of so many more social issues that have existed, but I guess they've been under the microscope. There have been many, many unfortunate instances that have occurred in 2020. From an S&P Global perspective, and I guess from a perspective of an employer, where do you think the role is, as a change advocate, for an employer to be a change advocate? Where do you think that role lies? And specifically, what kinds of things have you and your team been doing at S&P Global to support some of these social issues?
Rita, it's been huge in the States, right? And obviously since May, after George Floyd's murder, it's been an eye-opening experience for all of us. I think we've always thought as HR professionals that diversity was important, and we strive, really worked hard and strived to really bring a diverse and inclusive workplace. In any company, that's been a mandate for me and you and George. But I think what happened in May was a wake-up call, a true wake-up call. And I questioned myself, and I know my colleagues question themselves, what can we do? How do we do more? This is just not enough. We've got to take a stance. We've got to do more. We need to keep educating ourselves. And definitely what we've done at S&P Global is we introduced courageous conversations. We had Robin DiAngelo come and speak to us. We've had Ibram Kendi come and speak to us, Jane Elliott. We've had incredible conversations. And for the first time, we're really opening up the dialogue at a deeper level, not just at a superficial level. I really think that we've done things, but we haven't done them as deeply. And we've really created a safe space for people so that they can actually talk about how they feel about the racial tensions that exist in this country, and how they feel about their colleagues. And we've taken a lot of action. We've always taken action, but it's been incremental change, and now we've accelerated that change. And this has been the year of a lot of change for us, but in particular, we do not believe that we can just pause here and say that we're doing enough. I think, everybody needs to wake up and say, what more can we do? And in Australia in particular, we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing for our Indigenous Australians? We've turned a blind eye for many, many years, and we need to be responsible, and we need to actually take a stance and work with our Indigenous Australians or our Black employees in the US and in the UK and in other countries, and really help create the environment where they can thrive and grow, because there has been systemic racism in this country and in the country that I grew up in Australia, and we need to really take a personal approach to this, not just a workplace approach.
And it is about, as you say, having those conversations and creating the space for those conversations to occur in a really authentic and genuine way. In terms of CEOs and CHROs that might be struggling with this, and I say struggle because sometimes there is the desire to open up a broader conversation, but sometimes the culture of the organisation doesn't always match that. What advice would you give to organisations that perhaps are not quite there from a culture perspective, wanting to go there aspirationally, but are also wanting to open up conversations around these social issues in their workplaces?
You've just got to do it, right? You have to just start. And it's really uncomfortable. It really isn't easy. It's not easy listening to your employees' struggles. And, my assistant was talking to me about how she's had to have the talk with her son. He's 11 years old. And how, he has to dress differently when he goes outside, and how he has to, really acknowledge authority in different ways. I mean, they really, Black employees and Black people in this country are treated differently. They are treated differently. We're not stopped. White people have a lot of privileges here that we forget about, and we have it in Australia as well. And I would say to any CEO and any executive leader that you have to just start the conversation. It is uncomfortable. You don't know where it's going to go. You've got to if you don't start, you're not going to create that deeper relationship with your people, and you're definitely going to miss out on an opportunity to really help them grow and help them feel that they're being heard in the workplace. And I think that's really important. Look, Rita, it was definitely difficult for us. We didn't know what was going to happen, and we just went with the flow. We opened the conversation, and we knew we had to do more, and that gave us more courage. Our employees reinforced it. And we did have employees that were questioning what we were doing, and we just brought them along and helped them understand why we're doing it. It's not about taking political sides either. It's definitely not about that. This is not about, being a Republican or being a Democrat in this country. It's about doing the right thing and treating people with respect and treating people with dignity, and people need to be on an equal footing.
Dimitra, I guess given all the issues that have occurred socially, but also from a COVID perspective, it has, I think, required a different competency or skill set from leaders. And I see that they've got to step up into maybe same base competencies, but they've certainly got to sharpen some of them up. What's been your observation around that? Any that you want to call out in particular as capabilities that leaders really need to hone as we move into the next 12 to 18 months?
We said empathy earlier. It's definitely being an empathetic leader is key. If you're not an empathetic leader and you can't empathise with your employees, then there's something that you really need to stop and work on. So that's a critical skill. I think the other one, especially right now, because we're gone through 2020 and it's been such a challenging year in so many ways, as I said earlier, that we really do need to inspire hope. It's not that it's going to get better tomorrow, but every day will be better, in the sense that we need to be able to, especially for, and I think about my young daughters, how important it is to really instill hope in them, and how to instill hope in our employees, our people, so that they know that things are getting better and things will get better. And I think they're the two key things I would say are critical.
And Dimitra, just extending on that question around the capabilities and skills, if we think about how leaders need to be developed around these social issues, it's one thing to start the conversation from a CEO or CHRO perspective. How do you think that's going to influence the way leaders are developed as well moving forward?
Great question. I think leaders will learn from other leaders right now. A lot more role modeling than ever before. Where everyone's watching every move a CEO makes, every move, people officer makes, or every move that the CFO makes. We're watching every move. And because we're not physically there, our auditory senses are working in overload. And I think that that's a big piece. So they're listening to every single word. And I think that that's the best learning for any leader right now, any leader that's wanting to grow. Any person at any level can really learn from their CEO or others around. And of course, don't forget, you also learn from those who are not doing so well and the things that you don't like. And I always say to people, when you take an internship or you take a job, you can learn from a good leader and a not so good leader. And so don't forget that, if you're working for someone you don't like, make sure you don't forget what it is that you don't like about them, so that you don't become that leader.
And Dimitra, the idea with the flexible working from home certain days and then being in the office, and obviously redesigning the workplace to be able to cater for that. If we look at, we've grappled with the whole idea of remote working, and we've had technology enable us in that way, and we feel a lot more comfortable that as a hygiene factor that's in place, and we're now trying to find ways that we can further enhance that. If we think about remote leadership, again, building on that, difficult conversations, what has S&P Global done around making sure that leaders have got not the right technology, but the right support to be able to lead teams that have probably been home for many, many months and they haven't seen them in just as many? Dimitra, I think your voice has gone there. I'm not sure.
Audio might have just gone.
Yeah, I think the audio may have just gone there, Dee. I'm just looking. It's dropped out for me.
Dimitra's audio has just dropped out, so we'll try and get her back. But I think, George, some of what Dimitra has been talking about, I mean, the vast social issues that have had to be covered in not only in the US, globally, right? But you've got a country that has just gone, from issue to issue to issue. For any organisation, it would be difficult to manage that, let alone one that, Dimitra leads. So it's
So absolutely, Risha. I hope you can hear me now.
We can.
It looks like someone's streaming some films and playing with my internet access here. So Wi-Fi is a little drained, sorry.
That's what happens when kids are at home. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, that's the story of my life, Dimitra. I'm on a Zoom call. My son at that point decides it's now time to jump on Fortnite and game till his heart's content. Yes.
Right.
Rita, you were discussing in terms of
we were reflecting on your comments, but how difficult it has been, I think, for leaders. And I think it's to pick up on your point, George. We often talk about remote work, but remote leadership is hard. The work that we do has us talking to lots of leaders. And the fact that it's really reset the mindset, I think, or reset how we lead when we can't see, and it always brings up the issue of trust. And how much do we really trust our employees when we can't? Not all work needs to obviously be micromanaged. We have, particularly knowledge work, a person goes off and does what they need to do. But there's got to be a lot of trust in that bank. I think particularly if you are a leader or even a person working for someone else, an employee, to make sure that you've got that two-way trust and good communication. So even when you are remote leading, remote working, you know that it can still go on, and organisations can still do very well. We've seen that, through the course of this year.
But
absolutely, Rita. Absolutely, and I think it's key. The trust is really difficult to build when you're a new employee and you're actually joining a company where you haven't actually got those relationships. Thankfully, in most cases, people have had these relationships and they can continue. I definitely think the trust aspect. I talk about at work. I talk about productivity is not the key, because we're not really that productive. We're working longer and it's harder to work in a productive way. There's interruptions, there's Wi-Fi connection issues, all those sorts of things. But we've got to focus on the outcomes. We've got to focus on the impact that we're having through the outcomes and the deliverables, as opposed to the productivity. Because it is a 24-hour day and people are working any hours of the day. I know my assistant actually has to, and some of my staff actually have their kids in school, so they're focused in the morning on getting their kids online, And so they don't actually start working until about 11 or 12, but they've got flexibility around their day, and I think that's super key. And you've got to trust people. You have to start on the basis of trust, otherwise you cannot make this work.
Can I just bring up another complexity with COVID, and that is we've got the remote working, we've got remote leadership, but then the whole question of educating our leaders around mental health as well. And if we're looking at verbal and non-verbal communication and being able to deliver messages when an individual's working virtually, I think that part there, certainly what Rita and I are seeing in the work that we're doing is, even from a capability standpoint, the number of organisations investing in mental health, first aid, to make sure that leaders can actually spot some of the signs as well. So, Dimitra, keen to get your perspective on that, and it's obviously a topic really close to my heart, but just keen to hear, just given all the other complexities that we've spoken about, the issue of mental health in the workplace.
It's huge. We're having conversations just like the social issues that we talked about earlier. We're having conversations about mental health. We've got lots of health authorities, experts coming in, talking about it, giving us their perspective, teaching people how to cope. We have, obviously normal EAP type programs, so all organisations have those, but it's not just the programs. You can have programs and people may not take them. You have to remove the stigma away from mental health, and we've tried to really bring that to life at S&P by talking about it. And we had a wonderful conversation where one of our employees actually shared some of the policies and some of the programs that he used to help him during difficult stage. And we've tried to create this through real stories. And I think that's really the essence here, is getting people to really share those stories and helping others and taking away the stigma. We talk about it all the time. It is something that we don't shy away from anymore, which I think is really important. And our CEO talks about it. He talks about it in a way that helps people see that it's okay, and he encourages people to take time out, and he gives people extra time, and he encourages people to go to the sites to get the information they need. It's in every single dialogue that we have with our employees. It's critical, George, and we have to live with mental illness, and sometimes it's longer than others, right? So it's short term and it's long term. And, I think we've all experienced some anxiety this year. No doubt. I mean, we've had 3 deaths in people that we've known through COVID. I mean, New York City was a complete disaster in March and April, and it really came to, it was a lot of fear. We were all living with incredible amount of fear. We didn't leave the home, and it wasn't because our government told us not to, it's just that we didn't want to. And so that creates a lot of anxiety, and I think we all needed to take some time out and think about nourishing ourselves and helping ourselves. So whatever it takes, everyone has different formulas to deal with this, but we've got to give the employees the resources, and then we've got to help them reach out for those resources.
And the narrative is a lot more broader than that, Dee, as well. If you're looking at not only the resources for individuals from a self-care perspective, but it's also, and you rightly pointed out, the stigma in the workplace with mental health, and that's only going to improve with conversations around that. But the broader narrative that I'm touching on here is that individuals themselves that might be working in your organisation may not be suffering from mental health, but they may be a carer of someone that's suffering from mental health. So it's not just about individuals in the workplace, it's understanding more broadly about the impacts in one's life as well.
So true, George. And that's why our programs are extended to the whole family, not just to the individual employee. It has to be the whole family, because it does impact the whole household, the whole family, not just one individual.
Yeah. Dimitra, just a change of directions with the next question. On reflection, if you're looking at over your career, are there, and I'm certain they have evolved over time, but are there particular routines or habits that you've initiated into your life that's made all the difference for you and your development?
Me and my development. Oh, yes, there's a lot of things that I've done in my lifetime that I stick with. They're routines. I'm a creature of habit, George.
I
And
remember.
I definitely start my day with prayer, right? I definitely start my day with prayer. That's a really important rebalancing for me. And everyone has, some people meditate, some people pray, some people sleep in, some people do whatever it is. I definitely start my day with prayer and meditation, and I think that's really key. And I know when I don't, the impact it has on me. I'm completely off. And I think that's really important. Definitely, I work out, and when I don't work out, I don't feel great. So again, the full health piece is really important. So my brain works faster if I work out. I feel like I'm energetic. I feel like I can, that my whole body's working, and that helps me work more effectively as well. But I think the most, and definitely right now when my girls have come back home to live with us, which is really, we were empty nesters for so long, and then they've come back and swarmed back in. It's really quite refreshing to have them back. I mean, at first it was like my husband and I, oh my God, they've completely disrupted us. They've disrupted our lives. We can't do what we used to do before. But, the fact is, it's been wonderful spending time with them. We're baking a lot. We're laughing. We were doing puzzles like everybody else for months and months, and then I'm like, no more puzzles. Definitely no more puzzles. But spending time with a family has been a real joy, and that has been an absolute blessing right now for us. And so I'd like to think that families become stronger units through this as well. And we've had our ups and downs. Trust me, it's been a rough ride in the beginning, and I think now we've got our boundaries, and everyone's, keeping to, respecting everyone's personal space, which I think is really important, especially when you live in Manhattan, like you're in a cramped space.
It's not the two parents and the two kids. It's actually 4 adults in the one house for you now, Dimitra. So
That's right. That's right, George. And very opinionated, very strong-willed, very independent women, as you could imagine.
As long as they pull their weight and help out as well, they can have the opinions as well.
Yes.
Dee, you've mentioned about the spiritual, physical, and obviously with the girls coming back in terms of the social well-being. Are there any productivity hacks, anything that that helps you be more productive, things that you do specifically outside of what you've discussed?
For sure, George. I don't have 1 hour meetings. I take 45-minute meetings or 20-minute meetings. And that's so important because you need space, you need time, you need to stretch your legs, especially, I'm sitting in the hallway, right? Stretching your legs, filling up your jug of water, getting more water, making sure I'm nourished, make sure I'm, hydrated. That's really important. And I think that makes me incredibly productive. I don't like being sort of crammed for time and going from back to back, because you do need to stop and think. And that's the other thing. I take big chunks of my day that are protected, and they're chunks where I can stop and think, and I need to reflect and be able to reach out to people that I need to reach out to, or do some research or do some reading, and that's critically important in what I do. Otherwise, I can't be at the top of my game, and nor can I help others in the workplace. So I think I know that we've been working with Thrive Global, which is Ariana Huffington, and the importance of sleep is also something that we should never take for granted. And I think you may remember I don't sleep much, and it's important to, I've been trying to continue to sleep more so that I can be more productive. And so definitely shorter meetings and checking in with my people. As a leader, I'm checking in with them. I use text, I use a chat just to say, how you doing today, how's things, or how's the dog, whatever it might be, just to help check in with people. And I think that short bursts are much more effective than long bursts. We do need to stay connected, and that's the challenge of remote leadership. And so we need to make sure that we've got that time to reach out.
Dimitra, we've got 2 questions that we ask all impactologists to round off our conversation. The first question is, if you were on a video call with your 18-year-old self, what advice would you provide young Dimitra?
I would say to young Dimitra, what would I say? Probably 3 things I'd say to young Dimitra. Don't doubt yourself. Even though you practice humility, don't forget to ask for what you want. And I think the third thing would have to just be continue to be fearless. I mean, maybe my 18-year-old self, I was a bit fearless, but I was a bit more of a rebel than fearless. But definitely be more fearless and courageous as early on as you can. I think it's very liberating.
Thank you. And the final question is actually not even a question. It's a game of word association. So we've got a series of words here. We share the word with you. You share with us the first word that comes into mind. Are you ready?
Okay, so it's like a speed dating thing.
Something like that.
Okay.
Family.
First,
HR.
my work.
Inspiration.
People. Friends.
Melbourne.
Home.
This is going to be awkward. New York.
City.
The island of Crete.
Paradise.
Love.
Life.
The future.
Hope.
Dimitra, as always, any conversation with you is nourishing, and we thank you so much. We know it is getting late now in New York. You've been so giving of your time and your insight, and both Rita and I appreciate you making the time, and we look forward to seeing you soon, and do take care.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Rita.
Thanks so
Be
much,
well.
Dimitra.
Thank you so
Great
much.
to see you both.
See
Thank
ya.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And we are 13 minutes to the hour before our next presentation. And our next presentation is with Rita. Help me out.
Rosie Thomas.
Thank you.
OAM. Rosie Thomas is the CEO and co-founder of Project Rocket, and it will be an extraordinary conversation, as they all have been. Rosie's going to be sharing the journey that her and her sister took in co-founding the amazing organisation which is Project Rocket. 13 minutes, go grab yourself a coffee or a drink, and we will see you back soon.